So to start off our panel, we're going to have our first three panelists introduce themselves and tell you a bit about why they're here.
My name is Teresa. I'm a parent, and I'm also a licensed marriage family therapist, currently working at Santa Clara County Mental Health. I'm very happy to be here. Hopefully, I can help answer some of your questions regarding mental health issue.
I'm Anna Singh. I'm a senior, and I'm here because as an underclassman and also this year, I struggled with anxiety and depression, and hopefully through what I have to say, it'll be easier for all of you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Harshita. I graduated last year, so I'm class of 2016, and I'm here to talk about my experiences struggling with depressive symptoms, anxiety, panic attacks while at MSJ, and what it was like to go through therapy while I was a student here, and my experiences with college mental health care now that I'm at Harvard.
Shh, please be respectful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Helen Sue with the City of Fremont Youth and Family Services. So we provide school-based counselors to many of the schools, and we actually do a lot of work, the police department and the whole city. We have a counseling center. And I'm also here just to talk from my own perspectives growing up as a bicultural student, who I think that's a special challenge a lot of people do face. And coming from a family where there's a very, very strong depressive gene, and knowing how to live with that, and being married into a family where a lot of people also deal with anxiety. So both those things.
Hi everyone, my name is Brandon Doe, and before I continue, I just want to thank all the speakers for being here. I want to thank the MSJ Mental Health Committee for not only giving us a chance to speak, but also giving you guys a chance to learn more about mental health and how difficult it can be at times. So what I'm about to say is something that only a few of my closest friends have known about me up until this point, and that's that I've been fighting depression for a little over 3 years now. And in many ways, I'm still healing to this day. The reason for all of it might seem silly to some people, but it's because I'm still waiting for that special someone, like a girl. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who's felt alone or unloved or even worthless for that matter. I've been there, and I've been told more than once that I'm too nice, as if it was a sin, and I've been told that I'll be nothing more than a friend. And I can't oppose what people think. It's the truth, it's how they feel about me. But growing up and being reminded over and over that I can't love someone the way that I want to, I can't make someone happy the way that I've always wanted to. It sucks, for lack of a better word. I can only dream of what it's like being a boyfriend, or being next to someone and knowing that me being there is someone else's happiness. That's my life stream. And it makes me think maybe my feelings don't mean anything to anybody. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I should just kill myself. I mean, those are the thoughts that run through my head every time that I see a couple, every time I see a dad walk his kid down the street, every time I see my friends hugging. It's especially difficult because love is something that's really everywhere. It's playing on the radio, it's on TV. My friends seem to have it, and I've never experienced what my friends have. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's only so much I can say in 5 minutes. My life at home is a whole nother story. But the reason I'm here today is I can't sit around knowing that there's people out there that have felt the way that I felt, and all they need is a little love. So I'm here today to, give a little love, give a little hope to those who might need it the most.
Okay, so I talk a lot better if I stand up. So my name is Sean Gabel. I am alumni 09. I'm business intelligence engineer. I develop business intelligence products. Oh no, someone's locked out. So I have bipolar disorder. So basically, imagine your moods as a sign function, so like this, like this, like this. Imagine, but with bipolar disorder, especially as you get older, it turns into a sign function of sine x to x2, x4, so it's like this, this, this. And at a certain point, it is possible for me to not only be manic, which means my brain is moving at 1 trillion miles an hour, but also feeling super depressed at the same time. And during those moments, I am at a higher risk for suicide. But I can go on and on about bipolar disorder. However, this is more about you. So everybody knows who The Rock is, correct? Yes? So The Rock has all these stress factors, but somehow he is able to accomplish a lot with the same amount of time we all have. And that's because of time management and minimizing his stresses, AKA pushing forward for his goals, but making his life easier so that he can accomplish it. So that means that he always makes sure that he sleeps at least 7 hours per night. And you see those on Instagram, where he shows us, wake up at, 4 a.m., his other IG, right? So what the point of this is that when you go to college, when you leave high school, you really need to focus in on yourself, and that is very important, because how can you help people if you cannot really help yourself first? So really focus in on yourself by meditating, by understanding what your stress factors are, what makes you anxious, or what makes you, it's like, well, I guess anxious or stressed. And I'm really focusing in on that because many of us have our own stories, have our own maybe diagnosis at a later time or now. And it's just really, I just want to make sure that you understand you have your own story. You make your choices. So make the choice to definitely, not rely on yourself, but to be mindful of yourself and understand that you have all these resources around you. Google it. It's like, I feel stressed out, I am contemplating suicide. Google, and even Siri. If you literally ask Siri, Siri will help direct you to a suicide hotline. So, and all of the, Cortana will do the same thing. So really, I guess, again, focus in on yourself, really understand and time manage correctly once you leave high school, because I can tell you right now, I study economics and it's not gonna get easier. Life is gonna keep on coming, but I know for a fact that all you guys are strong enough and ambitious enough to really hone in on yourself and get those goals you're really reaching out for. So if you have questions about bipolar disorder, I'm here, and all these excellent panelists are great. So thank you.
Okay, everybody, I just wanted to say again, if you have any questions during this panel, just write them down on your note card and raise your hand. People standing at the side will come get them. It is completely anonymous. We will not say who wrote down the question. Okay, so now we'll get to some questions we prepared beforehand. Here's a question from the last panel, which I think is important. How do you distinguish a stressful time versus anxiety, mildly hysterical crying versus a panic attack?
Okay, so we can't get into, diagnosing a particular, but I think in general it's a great question when people are asking, well, how do I know if this is just a normal reaction to a really crappy, stressed out time, or how do I know when it starts to become an issue? And parents will also ask this, well, how do I know if they're just having a bad day or it's a teenage mood swing versus an actual problem? A lot of it is knowing yourself. If this is a huge change from your normal functioning and it's not just going away after, a week or so, it's time to start paying attention. I remember working with a client who was a brilliant scientist, but battled anxiety disorder her whole life. And one time in session I said, we all have ridiculous thoughts. And she said, you do? I said, yeah, we all do, we're all going to have some ups and downs and problematic thoughts and sometimes symptoms that bother us. But if it goes on too long, more than a week or two, and it's actually really impacting your functioning, you're not talking to your friends, your grades are changing, you're not feeling like taking care of yourself, all your thoughts are really changing and shifting to the anxious and the stress and the worry, that's not normal, and that's something that you can actually get help and support with before it has a bigger impact. I think a lot of times we try to be really stoic and strong and just tough it out, and it's not really necessary. You know, sometimes things are a lot better when you just intervene really early, learn some new skills. You know, there should never be any shame in seeking support or skills, because the fact is you're not grown yet. You're supposed to have to learn things. It's just part of the process. And plus, plenty of adults are still seeking treatment because they're struggling with something new that may have happened, and they've suddenly realized that whatever their coping skills were, now they feel really overwhelmed. It's impacting their job. They're screaming at their kids all the time. It's impacting their marriage. It's like, oh, okay, there's support for that. So it's really a lot about knowing what's your baseline of functioning, and if it's really impacting your functioning and not just like a bad day or a disappointing like incident once, then that may be a sign.
Want to quickly add to that. So before I did say you guys are strong enough, but what I meant by that, I just want to clarify, is that what a lot of people do, and some of the greatest people know when to ask for help. There is a type of strength to know when to ask for help, to find those resources that you need. So you're never alone in this. There are people who are out there who study this to help you and to become that person you want to be. So, that's about it.
Sorry, can I add in really quick? So for me, I had a similar issue to the person who asked the question. And the way that I dealt with it was, if I could pinpoint what was causing me to feel upset or anxious, then I knew that in a few days it would usually like wear off and I would be okay. But if it was something like, I would just be going about my day and doing normal things and everything made me anxious, then I knew, something bigger is going on. So you have to gauge whether it's like one thing that's making you feel that way, or if it's just you're feeling that way and everything's making it worse.
Okay, so our next question is, how do you support someone when they believe that they do not need help or are not willing to seek help?
So I just learned that, well, not just learned, but the past couple of weeks, I just learned I have a family member who is in a domestic abuse relationship, financial abuse and domestic violence. So what that entails is when someone is within that relationship, if you guys feel like you're in one, please seek help. It is essentially being like on a drug. A lot of times people in those situations are unwilling to seek help. And a lot of times what I have to do and what I'm trying to do every day is help be there for them, but also encourage them to go to an outpatient program or to seek or to be part of those groups. It got to the point where my family member tried to commit suicide. And I found that family member because I went over to their house, and they were locked in their garage, and luckily I was there and we avoided it. If I did not come a minute later, they would have died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So coming back to that question is understanding and asking and communicating with that person, how can I help? And respecting what they say. You don't want to overcrowd somebody. If someone, like for example, in everyday life, it's like overcrowding you, keep on asking like, how can I help? Or doing something you don't like, just say, hey, this is what I want, and this is how I would like to be helped. So that is definitely something that both parties need to understand.
I agree with that, and from personal experience, I think that you don't necessarily have to find out what's wrong about them, even though they might seem upset. You don't have to ask what's wrong because it might come across as annoying or even unhelpful, even though your intentions are the best of intentions. So for me, I think what really helped me the best was, just knowing that someone was there for me, wanting to spend time with me rather than feeling alone. Because feeling alone with a mental illness is really devastating, and it can really take a toll on the things you do. So, yeah.
There's not a simple answer, but in general, listening and being supportive and getting educated and bringing resources and information is a great way to start. There's lots of reasons why someone might not realize that they're in a position where they're kind of deep in a hole and they need some kind of additional help or perspective. I mentioned in the last panel, there's an agency called FERC, Family Education Resource Center, right near where my office is located, near City Hall. Everything at FERC is free. They have a library of every kind of mental health information that you could ever want, and if they don't have it, they can get it. Plus, everyone that works there has a family member or a loved one who has struggled with and survived a mental illness, and so they totally get it, and they know what it's like. And so, just finding places to get the support, and sort of arming yourself. I had mentioned I'm doing a mental health awareness month fundraiser at my CrossFit gym Saturday, and one of the slogans on our shirt is, "The more you know, the less you judge." That how you approach helping really matters. You can't come across, as they said, like a know-it-all. Well, what you need to do is blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe that worked for you or your other friend, but that's not the approach that this person wants. And it can't be like, oh, you need help, poor you. It's like, get the facts. It's just something that happens like any other condition. I guarantee you in a room of this size that someone you care about is really struggling or you may already know. And that, if it's an average of 1 out of 5 people in the population is going to go through a period of some kind of mental health symptom struggle. And so really making it clear that you're there to be supportive and to get information and to get educated for whoever it is in your life. And there's a lot of great resources. For more severe illness, there's even a book that's written by a psychiatrist, and it's called "I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help." And he wrote it because his own brother actually wound up being extremely ill and ultimately with, I think, a chronic schizophrenic condition. And so because his brain wasn't functioning right, he couldn't even really see that he needed help. And so that whole book was just about how he had to talk and explore and compromise and find ways to support his brother even at his most ill. And it's also a great resource.
Yeah, I would like to talk to the people who secretly struggle with some mental health symptoms. If they are aware that they are struggling with some issues, I want them to know they are not alone. A lot of people suffer from mental health issues, and there are helps out there. And if you do not, for some reason, you don't want to talk to your friends, you don't want to talk to your parents, you don't want to talk to the teacher, and there are professionals out there, and counseling would be confidential, and our priority is confidential because we want to make you safe. Unless your symptom is really severe and put you in the high risk of hurting yourself or others, we cannot keep that confidential because we want to save you and then save you from hurting yourself or hurting others. Otherwise, all the counseling session will be confidential, so make you feel like safe to talk about your issue. And for you who worry about your friends, I would highly encourage you to take care of yourself as well, because no matter you believe or not, I used to be a teenager. No, I'm not born as old as I am right now. I used to have friends, as a teenager, and we always have friends who suffer from different kind of issue, and who even mention about they want to die. And I remembered, and we are just, worried to death, maybe more worried than the person that make that comment. So I really want you to take care of yourself as well, and listen to your friend. Do not make any promise that, okay, I will keep it secret because you want to get help for them if they cannot, if they are too sick to get help. You would like to talk to an adult, you would like to get some help for them. And you rather to have a very angry friend who angry at you instead of having an angel friend, no longer to be there. And as a teenager, I used to let my friends know that I really wish I can grow old with you together, and let's see each other as like old lady and having fun together.
Okay, so our next question is from a member in the audience. What do you do to deal with depression and stress, and what method or avenue helped you the most?
So I guess the way that I characterize symptoms of mental illnesses and struggling with mental illness is it's kind of like, say you have a broken leg. You need to figure out ways to maybe not take the stairs, ways to get to where you want to go, given that you have a broken leg. You need somebody to maybe, like in certain instances, you need to ask a friend for support. You need to maybe learn to use crutches. And I would equate having symptoms of mental illness, like having an exaggerated anxiety response, being susceptible to panic attacks at certain instances in time. I would equate that to having some sort of like broken leg. And for me, what was helpful was going to therapy and figuring out what strategies I wanted to employ to have a successful and happy and meaningful life, despite the fact that I had a very strong anxiety response, where I was very susceptible to panic attacks, and I would have panic attacks regularly during stressful periods of time in my life. For me, it was therapy. It was being able to talk to someone about, hey, like, I think that the way I handled this kind of situation makes it more likely for me to spiral. I think that this is something that brings on an anxious response. Hey, like, this happened the other day. How should I prevent that from happening again? What could maybe be useful? And then more recently, I have gone on medication, and the way that I would describe that is if you have kind of peaks and flares of really bad moments when you're having trouble with mood regulation, medication, at least for me, and it behaves differently for everyone, but what it did for me is it made those spikes a little lower so that they were more manageable, and it made it more possible for me to use the strategies that I was learning in therapy and discovering with my therapist. It made it easier to employ them in heated moments of, say, when I am on the verge of having a panic attack. That verge feels less extreme, and I'm more able to think about what I need to do to take care of myself in that moment. I would definitely say it was therapy, discovering my strategies through therapy, because they're really going to look very different for each and every person. And then having the assistance of medication more recently to employ those strategies.
So I do agree that therapy and maybe even medication, it will work. It worked for me. But outside of a facility, for me personally, I fell in love with comic books, and that helped me cope because these are superheroes. They have superpowers. They seem invincible at times, but they became heroes because they've come from something that happened to them in the past that was maybe traumatic. Batman, he lost his parents. Spider-Man, he lost his uncle. And yeah, Iron Man, he dealt with alcohol and depression. These things are written by real people who've gone through these actual things, and reading these stories and knowing that I'm not alone and that there's people actually writing about this in a form that I love, that's really comforting to know. And I'm sure that there's many other, media out there that you guys can seek comfort in. So.
And these are all really great suggestions. It's a really great question. One of the tasks in life to learn is about how do we take care of ourselves, especially when we're getting ready for a day that our parents aren't going to be next to us when we're in college or whatever. So we need our own coping skills. And I know you all have some already. You've made it this far. But what happens is that I think we all tend to do a couple things for coping skills. But what happens when you go forth to a new level in life and you have a brand new challenge that you've never had before? Your first relationship problems, your first job, the first class that you may really be struggling with. So I always say it's really helpful to think about developing almost like a menu of coping skills so that you don't just have the one or two. That if your one or two usual coping skills just aren't cutting it for whatever's happening to you right now, can you learn some more? And develop more. And honestly, that's a lot of what therapy is about. When people are like, what do you guys talk about? It's so mysterious. It's the venting and the healing and the being heard and not judged, but it's also really practical skills building. What are the skills that are going to work for you? Are there ways to change your thinking, cognitive behavioral therapy? Is it something else? And developing the lifelong skills to maintain it. That therapy doesn't last very long. People have this fear, if I go to treatment, I'm going to be in treatment the rest of my life. Most people aren't. It's usually short term, but hopefully you can leave therapy with your list of coping skills, and is that art? Is that comics? Is it exercise? Is it the way that you sleep or that you eat? I often joke with my staff, but it's not a joke. If I didn't work out, I would probably, hit somebody. And I really have noticed in the past many years that I don't think I have had seasonal affective disorder, the winter depression that I would get anymore, partially because of the workout and the nutrition and the sleep regimen that I've got now, and that no matter how busy I am with work, if things need to fall behind because I need some time with my family or my friends, I'm gonna make it, because I understand now what happens when I don't, that you will get sick one way or the other. And actually in college and graduate school, I got also physically sick, and that happens too. That you'll see a ton of it in college and sometimes high school too. The migraines, the stomach pains, like just all the ways that your body is telling you, and the depression or the anxiety, that you're not taking good care of yourself.
I think both of us want to talk for this question. Is that okay? Okay. So just to add on to the menu thing that was mentioned, something that really helped me was relying on my support system, which was mostly my friends. A little while ago, I was going through a really tough time, and I texted one of my friends, and he responded immediately and just kind of talked me through it, talked me down a little bit. And then I was able to go out with a friend and just, talk with them about what was bothering me. And that was really helpful, because just feeling heard sometimes is part of the whole, that's part of why I felt depressed, because I felt like nobody could hear me. And another thing that helps me is sometimes writing down what I'm feeling. So I have this notebook, and if there's something I don't feel like talking about with anyone, I can just write it down and read it later, I guess. So that's helpful if you don't feel like talking to people as much.
Yeah, a lot of things will help you reduce your stress, like light therapy, having sunshine, and also the dark therapy, go to bed early, and because in the dark and the body, there's some hormone, is melatonin, will help you too. And also exercise, Tai Chi, and yoga. For myself, because I'm too busy, I'm too lazy, I don't go to, exercising that much, and as a mom, and I was always running around. So I'm using the breathing technique, at least, I don't have excuse that I don't have time to breathe, right? So I try to deep breathing, and also sometimes I added some imagery to my head, like, okay, I breathe all the love and all the positive energy and blow out all my stress, and breathe in all the positive energy and blow out all the negative energy. When my daughter has a problem with me, and I would say, oh, I breathe in all her love, and I believe she loved me, and breathe out all my anger and my frustration. So that's a very easy one. And also I try to change my posture, because health psychology shows if you change your posture, open your chest, chin up, then more oxygen will coming in, and then you will feel less stress. And you can try when you walk back to the class, chest up and chin up, and do it with your friend. If you feel funny and laughing with your friend, that's even better, because laughing with friend will really reduce your stress and also increase the neuron in your mind, and which make you smarter. Okay, and when you ask questions and try not instead of raising hands like this, you raising hand like this, and waving in the air. And social psychology shows if you stress your raising your hands like this will increase your self-confidence.
Okay, guys, just wanted to say quickly, if you have any personal questions, you can come to us after, because we're trying to address general questions that can impact everybody. Okay, so the next question is really quick. Maybe the professionals can answer it. Is there a way for a minor 16 to 17 years to get antidepressants or medication without parents knowing?
You're getting into the legal things. The California State Bar has a guide called When You Turn 18. It's really, 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 really useful. You can find that online, and it goes over all your rights and responsibilities when you turn 18, so FYI. As for treatment, I think we're in this really weird, honestly, state where the law is that actually if you're over 12 and of sound mind and decent judgment, you can seek treatment on your own. That's the law, if you're over 12. Now, logistically, how it actually works out, though, is really way more complicated than that. That there's a lot of practitioners who may not be comfortable with that, especially with prescriptions. But basically, I think you can find treatment without your parents knowing, without being 18, but then the struggle is too, how are you going to pay for it? So honestly, that's a challenge a lot of our students come with, because maybe you can finally find the treatment, but then you don't want to charge your parents' insurance. So, so those kind of logistical questions, you may need to find help from, say, like a case manager. So those are like social workers, like we have them at the Fremont Resource Center, and they have helped a lot of young people who are maybe applying for their own insurance. And the county, and this is getting way into the weeds, but like the county has things called sensitive services Medi-Cal, where minors have actually gone to the county and made their case for why they need services, and that they don't have guardians that are able to help with that decision. So that's a summary.
Yeah, like Dr. She mentioned about the law change a couple years ago, like as long as you are 12 and older, you could ask for help without parents' consent, but things are more complicated because as a parent, we don't like that. But as a therapist, we try to convince kids involve their parents, because it's hard for you yourself struggling with mental illness without parents' support. We want to treat the whole system. Hopefully parents can support you, especially medication. Because you are taking medication, you really need to work closely with psychiatrists, and you need parents to monitor you. And because you are still developing as a teenager, and sometimes you really need to be cautious about the medication, the dosage. Some medication have different kind of side effect. Everybody is very unique. One person may be good, one medication may be good for one person, not good at the other person, and because of side effect, and the kids may not to taking it and may not tell the psychiatrist. So really need to work with the parents as assistant to treat you with medication. For the counseling, also we would like to work with parents too, because parents can know how to support you. And that's my answer.
So very quickly, because I'm bipolar and I have anxiety as well, I have a lot of medication in my toolbox. However, even though I have, personally, this is my story, is that I have 2 medications that I can use for 1, mania, and 2, anxiety. However, my anxiety medication is highly addictive, which means that I should not be taking it and relying on it. So just relying on medication alone isn't such a great, it's not a great idea, because there's other parts of achieving good mental health. So that's why you need to really not only work with the psychiatrist and the therapist or the therapist, but also going back to what I think was said earlier, like bring in that support system that you need. And luckily, my girlfriend and I, 8 years since mission, she is probably the most important part of my support system. When I feel that mania, when I feel that crash down to depression, I text her really quick. We have a code word, and we adjust our schedule accordingly. And this happens with the bigger, more famous people. A lot of couples or people who support each other have those sayings, and even I think I would like to say it was Zuckerberg, but it might have been somebody else, where him and his CFO have an emergency word where something happens and then they drop what's going on and they cover for each other. So if these guys, these big guys, multi-billion-dollar guys, are worrying about their mental health, I believe that all of us should be aware and really work on that mental health part. So in the end, medication is not always a solution.
Okay, so maybe 2 panelists can talk about the next question. What do you suggest for someone who has to wait for treatment / wait for their stressor, to remove their stressor? What can you do in the meantime to be less stressed?
Could you repeat the question?
What do you suggest for someone who has to wait for treatment? What can they do in the meantime to be less stressed?
Wait, do they mean like they can't be treated in the near future, or like did they?
It says, What do you suggest for someone who has to wait for treatment or wait to remove their stressor? What can they do in the meantime while that stressor is still present to be less stressed?
Okay, I'm going to take a stab at this. I'm assuming that you mean that you are seeking help, but you can't see the doctor for 3 weeks for some odd reason. And that's not usual. Well, a doctor would, well, my doctors have an emergency line saying, if you are experiencing this, here's my direct number. But anyway, to minimize, well, I guess if you're experiencing that kind of situation where you really need help, call 911 if you're in danger to yourself or others. And the police, whoever is going to show up, are there to help you. So that's number one. Number two is if you want to decrease your stress factors, breathing, working out, yoga can really help those minor things. For the major stuff, I yield to the professionals.
Well, in Santa Clara County, that when patient asks for help and they have to wait for their appointment, so some of them are very panic and mention about what can I wait for, weeks to see the doctor, and we always give them mental health urgent care and the address and the phone number just in case, when they are waiting, if they are really stressed out, if they have some more urgent symptoms, they could always walk into mental health urgent care. I think that message is kind of comforting. They are not necessarily will go to mental health urgent care, but at least for them to know that, well, there are services out there, mental health urgent care, anytime you can walk in to get some help. So I believe Alameda County has a similar office and services too.
I think part of it, and I educate parents about this too, is sometimes you have to advocate for yourself pretty strongly. That unfortunately we all know there's a healthcare system that's a little overwhelmed, and sometimes if you don't make it clear, if you're like, I'm okay, I just kind of want to see somebody, they're really going to deprioritize. To be really clear, like this, I really want X, I need it at a certain time, that sometimes the noisy wheel is the one that gets the attention. Like I've learned when I used to have Kaiser, I need to tell them, like, because I would call for an appointment for something, they'd be like, do you want to talk to an advice nurse? And it's like, no, I'm in pain, or I work in this kind of setting and I'm at risk for blah, blah, blah. That often if you advocate for yourself a little, things speed up. And this is a real risk and a real struggle, that Kaiser has actually been sued by not only patients, but by their own staff for making people wait too long. And that's not good for health. Although the other flip side of that is try really hard to get treatment before you're at the urgent part. Now, if you're in urgent need, the good news is, as everyone has said, there are urgent care services, and that's great. I think a lot of people, though, might be living in that weird limbo where you're not at urgent care, you're maybe not wanting to call the suicide hotline, and you're not in an emergency, but you're miserable. And that's really hard, because that's where a lot of us live, actually, at different times. And in that place, it's using all the self-care, using all your supports, really understanding that, this too will pass. You are more resilient than you think. You cannot avoid all suffering in your life, and there's going to be days that you're going to fail or have a bad time. But instead of like wallowing in like I'm a failure, really understanding that that is completely normal, and you can get back up again. That you're not going to get far, or as they say, if you never want to be criticized, don't ever try anything new or creative. That if you are trying, you're going to get some bad hits sometimes, and it's not going to feel good, but not to catastrophize that, and to know that, okay, I can find solutions and supports for this and get past this.
Okay, so this is a quick reminder. Please be respectful when panelists are answering questions. Okay, so our next question is, how do you deal with a depressed person who refuses to talk or listen to reason?
Okay, from personal experience, I do know some people who are like that, and it's, like I've said before, it's not necessarily a matter of finding out what's wrong with them and trying to fix that situation in itself, because maybe they don't want to talk about it. It's just that simple. So just being there for them and giving them comfort is maybe the best of your ability. That's all you can do. And if it gets any more serious than that, then seek help, because it's gotten to that point where, they might be harming themselves or others, and, professional help is required.
Oh, sorry. Having been that person who didn't want to talk about her issues at all, I can say, as Brandon said, give them a little bit of space and let them know that you're there. But also check in on them every once in a while, because a lot of people with anxiety or depression don't necessarily want to reach out to their friends, even if they're feeling like a little better. So the best thing you can do is just check in, be like, hey, how are you doing lately? But don't be condescending about it. Like, don't make them feel like they'd be burdening you with their problems, because a lot of people feel like they'd burden their friends, and that's the main reason they don't talk to them. But if you let them know that they're not a burden, then that's really helpful for them.
Okay, so the next question is, what was going through therapy like? What's something that helped that they did? Describe the experience.
So I went through therapy for a little over a year, and in the beginning, it definitely seemed a little strange, because I was talking about feelings that I've never talked about before, and not even to my friend, but to a stranger that I've just met. And yes, it's a weird experience at first, but then afterwards, my therapist didn't went down to the nitty-gritty and said oh, it's a chemical imbalance in your brain. He gave me stories and analogies that helped me easier understand, my condition. He told me the story where, right now, your mind is like a cassette tape or a cassette player, and the tape that's in right now is not really something you want to listen to. So what we're trying to do in therapy is to take that cassette out and put it on the shelf, leave it there for a while. We can come back to it if you need it, but what we're trying to do is put a new one in and play that one instead and see how that goes.
Sure. So I started going to therapy at the end of my sophomore year, took a break for a bit, resumed again for multiple months during my junior year, again took a break and resumed again for multiple months during my senior year, and started therapy the second I got to college, just because I knew by that point in time that it was just a very effective support system for me to have. I think describing what it was like, a couple of anecdotes that come to mind is, I think, just talking through my struggles with my anxiety, or the ways that it gripped me, or the mental patterns that I had, and developing language for this. So one of the things that one of my therapists helped me understand is that when I'm often in an anxious headspace and thinking of something over and over, I start catastrophizing. And this word catastrophizing was really helpful, because then I was able to identify, okay, the world isn't actually going to end, but this is a symptom of my mental illness, and I am catastrophizing. And being able to say, I'm catastrophizing now, Harshita, stop catastrophizing. Realize that this is something you're doing. And I think, until you have that awareness and are able to articulate exactly what's happening, it's often difficult to stop it. It's difficult to say, these are thoughts that are not helpful. I need to think about where they're coming from and handle them in a positive way. And I was able to talk through these scenarios with my therapist. Another thing that a therapist once said was that I need to stop fearing my anxiety. I had gotten into this pattern where I would get anxious about being anxious, about being anxious, about being anxious, and it would keep going and getting worse and worse. And just identifying, the therapist said, okay, if you wake up on some days and you wake up anxious and you're like, wow, this sucks, today's gonna be an anxious day, that's okay. Let that sink in. And I actually tried it, and it stopped that repetitive, destructive, vicious cycle of getting more and more anxious. So it's small things like this, right? These might not resonate for all of you. It's specifically what worked for me. But I think what's useful is being able to go in and talk about, hey, this is something that I experience. What's a useful way to maybe think about it differently? What's a useful pattern to stop? This was very useful, is to identify, it's the depression talking, or it's the anxiety talking when I'm having some thoughts, and not letting those thoughts define me, and not letting myself believe that that was actually what was going on. It was my mental illness, and I need to stop it from interfering in my life. So just having language for this kind of stuff, having strategies for interrupting destructive thought patterns, is what I would say it was like. It was also very collaborative with my parents. So I think this is kind of relevant to the topic of not wanting your parents to know. I think a lot of us often have a hard time communicating with our parents on, hey, this isn't helpful, this is helpful. And I think my therapist was very useful in, at the start of every session, my therapist would sit down and like check in with my mom, like, hey, what's Harshita been like recently? What are some things that are hard for you? And maybe give my mom advice on how to support me better. I would tell my therapist, hey, my mom's driving me nuts in this way. Can you like maybe talk to her about these things and how she can support me better? And having someone who's a professional advocate for you and really open up lines of communication with your parents is, I think, very helpful.
I just want to quickly add to that. So the part about therapy is, if you don't like your therapist, you can find another one. You're not chained to that therapist. So if you're not clicking with that therapist, go try to find another one that you really click with. And it's very important that you really click and trust your therapist, because if you don't and hold things back, the treatment or the entire point of therapy is not really working. Luckily, I found a therapist who I am excited about going to therapy now, and it's because he helps me keep track with mindfulness, because I work in the technology field. It's always going, and with my with bipolar disorder, it is very, very important to keep track of my moods. And there's points where, when I'm doing mathematics or, trying to figure out, write scripts, comes to a point where my mind is going so fast that it crests into mania. And if it wasn't for the therapy that I've had for 4 years now, I would not be in a good place, to say the very least.
So I'd like to add really quickly, for those who don't know what therapy is like, you might imagine it as like sitting there, in the classic Freudian chair and just laying back, and spilling out everything. In some ways, it's like that. There's different types of therapy. For me, I did talk about how I felt, and I think what helped the most is that my therapist took how I felt seriously. I mean, considering my story, it was because of girls and relationships. And at first, before I told him that, before I started talking about this, I said that, oh, this might be a silly thing, I might not want to talk about it. And he said, well, relationships are serious, that's why we all exist, because of relationships. And so, the therapist is there not to judge you. He or she is there to, listen to your problems and help you out.
So we want to thank everyone for attending this event. We want to thank all of the teachers who took time out of their schedules to bring their students to this. And what we really hope you can get out of this is continued conversation with the people sitting around.